Welcome to the podcast, Jenny. I am so thrilled to have you on the podcast today. And I can't wait to dive in on your entrepreneurial story. You're now a speaker and a trainer, and I can't wait to dive in. So, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, I really am interested in diving into your transformation story, and we'll get to that. But first, can you set the stage for listeners a little bit on where you're at now and kind of how you got there?
Okay, well, I am a national executive director with 31 Gifts, and I started with the company when it began in 2003. So when I joined, I had no idea anything about direct selling, how to sell anything, how to sponsor and add people to my team. I was just strictly doing it to earn a little bit of extra money, and it really because my friends and neighbors, they just loved the product. I had my first party and they loved it. So I was like, oh, I can do this. And so I just wanted to make a couple of $100 extra a month just for those extra expenses with kids. My kids were young at the time. And so that's why I joined, and I had no clue what I was doing. The company was brand new, so there really wasn't a training program or anything like that. So I just jumped in with both feet and just started to find that I loved doing it and just loved having that outlet as a mom. And, my kids were, let's see, I think 11, 8, and 3. So just having that outlet of leaving and doing the home parties and being with other women just kind of was attractive to me, and just having that me time. So that's kind of how I got
Mhm.
started.
Mhm. And I love 31 Gifts. I have many of their products. My sister-in-law used to sell 31 Gifts, so I definitely can see the appeal. They're so useful and, quality. So I would really love to hear how you kind of transformed from a kind of shy or wasn't like living in your power. You weren't living in your true potential when as a stay-at-home mom. Not that that's nothing wrong with that at all, but I would love to hear how becoming, an entrepreneur helped you transform into, an empowered mom who was not only earning money but building one of the biggest teams, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that was definitely a gradual process, and just one of the great things, I guess a good benefit I could say of what I had or still have is our CEO and founder of 31. We still work, but in the beginning, we worked very closely together and, starting and building the company with a few others. And she has always been really good at asking me to do things and pushing me outside of my comfort zone. And I think that is the way that you grow. So I mean, the list goes on of what she's asked me to do, or, step up and lead leader retreats or get on stage and speak in front of thousands. And considering when I did my first party, I was scared to death to talk in front of the few that were there, maybe like 10 people. I actually didn't speak up in front of them like you're supposed to do at a home party. Like you get up and you talk about your product and you sell it. And I just didn't really do that. I just stood beside my little cute table with my products and um, just hope and prayed that if anyone talked to me, I could answer the question. So it's a it's a gradual thing, and I think you cannot do start any business no matter what it is and think you're going to be this powerhouse person. Like you have to learn and take the steps. And I think the biggest thing you have to do is understand that you have to get out of your comfort zone,
Mhm.
because if you stay there, you're not going to grow, your business is not going to grow. And so just doing that so many times has really helped me become a successful entrepreneur after 20 years. So,
Mhm. I really love that you highlight the incremental change, the gradual change, because We often think that we want success, especially as an entrepreneur overnight. And when you're completely trying to change what you do and who you are, it can't happen overnight. It's
Right.
like I've heard it being compared to like pregnancy in a way. You find out you're pregnant and you don't have the baby the next day, right? Yeah. You
Yeah.
have this period of time where you're able to kind of wrap your head around it and prepare and learn as much as you can. Um, so what were some of those things that you had to do to kind of get out of your comfort zone? And has it gotten easier over the years?
It definitely has gotten easier. I feel like, over the course of time, I've become confident in my abilities and also, and not overly confident in like a bad way. I think that it's okay to say that you're confident in what you're doing, right? So,
Yeah.
um, I feel like that's part of it. And then as far as like things I did, I, when we were growing, it was really hard, and so we just had to jump in and do what needed to be done. And one of the very first things I remember doing as a leader, and by the way, I never thought I would be a leader. And then all of a sudden I was a leader and leading people, and I'm like, okay, let's figure this out now. And so we wanted to have a leader retreat. So I don't remember how many leaders we had in the company, but someone had to step up and plan the retreat. And so I ended up being that person. And that was the very first big event that I had ever done ever in my whole life.
Mhm.
And um, we ended up having about 100 people come to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and we rented cabins and we, organized the schedule and the training within our group of people. We did the training.
Mhm.
And that was like a huge thing.
Yeah.
So, it's just realizing here's these things that come up and you just jump in and you do them and then you learn and you grow from them. So
Mhm.
that's kind of how it's always been. I'm always trying to figure out like the next thing that to help my team and my leaders be successful
Mhm.
and not really pausing on getting in the details of I got to know everything before I can plan XYZ. Um, you just jump in and you do it and you learn as you go.
Mhm. I love that you talk about beginning to see yourself as a leader. And we talk about that on the podcast because so many times moms can want to become an entrepreneur and don't see themselves as leaders and don't realize how much you do as a mom prepares you for leadership. There's so many things that as moms we do that we don't give ourselves credit for. So, can you give us some insight on how maybe motherhood prepared you for leadership, how you developed as a leader, and how you lead with impact?
Yeah, I love that you said that because if you think about it, like as a mother, you are leading little people. You're
Yeah.
scheduling, you're planning birthday parties, you're organizing their day, organizing their space, making sure they have groceries. So, I mean, I have never really thought of it like that, but
Mhm.
it's so true. And so you just take the skill sets and you can transfer them and you just got to think about it a little bit differently, a little shift change in thinking of taking those same skills and working a business. So I love that. Um, as far as like leading with impact, I would say that uh, throughout the course, again, this is gradual. I think the whole process is gradual, and I think that what I like to do is to learn a skill and teach my leaders and not give up on teaching them. There's just different things that I use in my business to help me stay organized and help me stay feel somewhat balanced in my life. And I want to teach those skills that I've learned to my leaders. So there's lots of things that I use in systems and things like that. At 31, I'm kind of known as the a systems girl. Like that's how I operate, and that's the only
Mhm.
way I know how to do it.
Mhm.
So yeah, teaching them how to do the system. So, the ones that do have young kids at home, like that kind of it tugs at my heart a little bit because, I want them to have the time with their kids because my kids are now grown. We have an empty nest, and our youngest is 24. So we've had an empty nest for 5 or 6 years now. So that time is gone for me. But I remember, the times when I was building this business and so like engrossed with it and just like I love it so much and I love working so much that there are regrets in raising my kids and not giving them enough time. So I think that having systems in place and teaching my leaders is one way that I lead with impact and showing them like you can use this system and save yourself time and you know make sure you're spending that time with your kids instead. And because it does go by so fast. I mean, we hear that all the time, but it is so true.
Mhm. Oh yeah, we definitely talk about systems and the importance of having them on the podcast too, because you shouldn't have to make that trade-off between being an entrepreneur and being the parent that you want to be. And if you're finding yourself working more in your business than maybe you should, definitely systems is a way to help free up your time and um, find more balance. I definitely agree with that. So, in becoming a leader, in training and developing as an entrepreneur, you definitely had to embrace a lot of change, right?
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, it sounds like 31 has grown rapidly, and that is a lot of change to keep up with. So, what are some of your tips on how, as entrepreneurs, we can embrace the uncertainty and begin to master embracing the change a little bit?
Yeah. I have definitely seen a lot of change in my 20 years. I celebrated 20 years in November of 2023. So, we have I mean, I could spend our whole podcast on change and how how to deal
Yeah,
with that.
right.
Well, I think for me, I just have realized that I have to be flexible. So where in my business, I am not the one necessarily making the decisions. It's our home office. So I have to do a lot of trusting and flexibility with that. But as a CEO of my own business with my 31 business, as far, when things happen with home office and then I have to pivot and adjust with whatever has changed, then the way I do that, I just try to take a minute, understand the change is really important to me. Like I need to know why we're doing this. I need to process it. So don't not reacting right away, I think is a really important thing to note. Because I used to do that back in the early days of being an entrepreneur. Something happens, I don't agree with it, and I just get mad. And, I didn't take that time. And I think there's something about a 24-hour rule that, when you hear something that you are just upset about, take 24 hours thinking about it before you respond to that email or text or whatever. And then after you've had 24 hours to think of it, you're probably going to feel a little bit different and you're going to react a little bit different. So I try now that I'm kind of a little older and I guess a little wiser, try to react that way. So that's kind of how I handle it now. And, after the other thing is, I think there's cycles in the business, no matter what business it is. So the first time you have something happen and that's your first cycle of that particular thing, whether it be you have lost some customers and you have to go find new customers, or your sales are down, or nobody wants to do business with you, whatever it is. Um, you eventually have that cycle again and again and again. That's just the way it goes in owning a business. So I have realized that, oh, okay, I've already been through this. It's going to be fine. We're going to be okay. So I think just going through the different cycles of the business more than once kind of helps you with that too.
Hmm. Yeah, I think those are really wise tips. We can tend to really not like a change that might be coming our way or something like that. And, realizing that it can just be part of the growth of the business and we can turn it around to work for us,
Yeah.
especially over the long term, is definitely a very mature way to look at it. And, two, I imagine that you have honed your skills in communicating change to your team as a leader, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You're
I think that's always important, and it's part of leadership,
Mhm,
because they're in their different cycles of their
mhm,
business, right? So some of them could be new leaders, some of them can be seasoned leaders. So
mhm,
um, yeah, I have said more than once, like we've already been through this, like it's gonna be okay. And
mhm,
not everyone has already experienced that. So we have to keep that in mind. And I think just saying how I feel about whatever the change is, and it helps calm them and
mhm,
know that, this is how I feel. We're going to be okay. Here's things that we can do, whatever that is. So that's part of being a leader is, and also not letting them know that you may or may not be sweating behind the scenes about whatever that is. You don't let the people that you're leading know 100% like all the ins and outs of how you feel about something. I not like hiding in a bad way, but I think it's good leadership to, um, I don't know how to say this, like just not let them see you sweat. You know what I'm
mhm.
saying?
Yeah, or even just like I said, not being reactive.
Yeah, that's
Um,
exactly it.
And really just I think emotional control is so important in leadership and business and realizing and I think when you're in it long enough, you realize that things always work out
Yeah.
somehow, some way. And so, you can really set the tone for how things go well or not well
Yes.
based on your reaction.
Yeah, I love that because on my team, like my leaders, they know we don't, this is not a place of complaining, like we're a place
Mhm,
of positivity. And
mhm,
you see that in, my leader group. And there are, other leaders within the company who are the complainers. And you can definitely see that. And somehow, whether you intend for it or not, it trickles down.
mhm,
And so I think that that's an important mindset too, is to understand, you know, there's a saying called, not called, but a saying, speed of the leader determines the pace of the pack.
mhm,
And I've always kept that in the back of my head. Like that's
mhm,
how I want to lead. How I lead is how I want my team to lead. So
mhm.
what I am saying to them is going to help them determine how to feel and how to run their business.
Mhm. Yeah, and we were talking about like how family life prepares us for leadership and entrepreneurship, and isn't it the same in our families?
Yes. So true.
If we're kind of stressing about things and maybe just like a change at a school or, some program that maybe our children are involved with and we are reactive towards that, we also really set the tone as parents. Um, how our children are going to react. So it really is the same thing. And I like to bring up examples like that just because I hear so often that women who want to become entrepreneurs say business is too complicated and they don't, leadership intimidates them. And so I like to incorporate those real life examples where you're leading already. you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's such a good point. I know of friends that have fears of certain things, like
Mhm.
I don't know, just being robbed or something, and they
Sure.
pass those fears on
Mhm.
to their children, or,
Mhm.
that's not a very good example, but I think that's a great point. Like
Mhm.
being aware of what you are scared of, what you're fearful of, and not necessarily passing that on to your team of people or your children if you still have children in the house, because later on in life, like I've seen this happen with some of my friends, like then the kids have those fears
Mhm.
and they didn't really ever have a choice. You know what I'm saying? Like they
Mhm.
were just passed on to them. So
Mhm.
I think that's such a great point.
Yeah, no, it definitely we don't tend to realize our power as a leader, and our ability to set the tone. And if you're gonna set the tone, then let's just go ahead and set it in a good way, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
So, do you have any other tips that maybe you would like to share with our audience of maybe women who want to become entrepreneurs or who are finding they're struggling balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship?
Well, I think that, if you're wanting to dive into entrepreneurship, um, doing your research, there's so much out there that you can watch other people on Instagram or listen to podcasts. I think that's a great way to learn is, searching those entrepreneur podcasts. Um, and then, if you once you make that decision, just take it in baby steps. And I said this earlier, but realizing that you don't have to know everything. I think that's super key. Because I used to do that. I wouldn't start a project or do something until all my ducks were in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to dive in. And really, my motto is I'm going to do something for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't work after 3 months, then I'll change it. So
Mm-hmm.
that could be, I actually just said this to a group of my team members last week. It started a Zoom with them. I said, we're going to do it once a month for 3 months. And then, see if you guys are showing up and participating. And if you're not, then we're going to figure something else out. So
Mm-hmm.
I like to give myself that low commitment. Um, that way I have a timeline, they understand the timeline, and then we can reevaluate after that 3 months. So I think that's a good rule of thumb is try it for 3 months. If it's not working, then you got to figure something else out and pivot. I also think figuring out like what systems are going to work for you is really important. And, there's all kinds of things out there. I think people get scared about systems, but there's apps that can help you stay organized with your task, or, there's Slack, Tick. I love Tick. That's just like an electronic to-do list. Google Drive helps you stay organized. So there's just, thinking about like whatever you're doing on a daily basis, how can you make that a system and don't get too bogged down in the details of that and think you have to be the best system person on the earth. You just, this system works for me. This is how I'm going to do it, but make sure it's kind of organized in the way that fits for you.
Mm-hmm. No, those are great tips. And I think people really kind of are fearful of systems because they feel like, oh, I'm not a systems person. I'm kind of pragmatic. And I don't think people realize how much freedom you can have when you have systems. And so I definitely encourage listeners to embrace that tip. And, you know, I do it too, where I think about things that I do routinely and how can we make it better? Or how can we use an app or something like that to automate something or um, do something in a different way or an easier way or streamline it. But a lot of your success, I think, for any entrepreneur is just the consistency and your perseverance. So, Can you speak to how you've been able to stay consistent? Because I hear that a lot too, is that people don't want to start a business because they don't trust themselves to be consistent. So, how have you managed to do that over the years?
Well, I think it definitely comes down to setting goals. And so if you're starting out a business, setting goals around how many new clients you want or how much in sales you need to make that month to meet the income goal. So starting small with the goals, then I think small is the key word there. I think a lot of people just have these big, audacious goals that aren't achievable. So then when you don't meet the goal, then you feel like a failure. So you have to start small. Um, so for me, when I first started, it was all about doing parties. That's how at 31 we back in the day we did home parties. Now that has kind of evolved in doing online and Facebook and things like that, still do home parties. But for me, the goal was 6 to 8 home parties each month. So that was a non negotiable goal for me. And that is what helped me build that business. So I would do whatever it took to meet the goal. So that back then it was getting on the phone. We didn't have Facebook and we had email. So you either called people or emailed and or making sure I booked parties from the party that I was doing. So having that not non-negotiable goal just helped me stay consistent in my parties. And then, that's what helped me build my business and started sponsoring and things like that. That's what you have to do in order to build a direct selling business. So the goal setting is huge for me, and I still do that. And I do it on the 3 month basis that I mentioned a minute ago. I look at my goals. I set them for 3 months. 12 months overwhelms me, so I just wouldn't do it until I found out about the 12-week year. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it is goal setting with every 3 months, and that just really that helps me. So I set the smaller goals for every 3 months and then reevaluate and set new goals. And it could be around family, business, and my personal goals. So it's not just business goals. I got to take care of myself and, show up for my family the way that I want to show up, but setting goals around that. So I make sure that I do it. And then once I set the goals and as far as sticking to them, that's just using the other systems you have in place, like the to-do list and things like that.
Yeah, I love that, not creating goals that feel so overwhelming to you. I think that that's the real key and secret to goal setting and achieving your goals.
Yeah.
Um, well, you've had so many great tips for listeners today who are starting and growing businesses. But if you had like a main takeaway, a few ideas that you want to really stick with listeners from our conversation, what would that be?
I would say just start with small goals and stepping outside of your comfort zone and realizing that that's what you have to do. Um, and then one thing we didn't talk about is accountability partners. And I think that's really important is finding someone or a group of people that are doing the same thing that you're doing and really connecting with them on a daily or a weekly basis, whatever works for you in some way. So that could be on text or Marco Polo or Voxer, just finding a way to communicate. So you're letting them know, like, this is what I'm doing. How are you doing it? That really helps me. I have a group like that, and that really helps me stay on track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great tip. I think there is a power in numbers when you're trying to achieve something, and it just kind of gives you an extra boost of energy. So I think that is another great tip. So thank you, Jenny, so much for being on the podcast. Where can listeners connect with you and learn more about 31 and what you do?
Well, you can find me on Instagram, of course, just under my name, Jenny Hillenburg. I also have a website, jennyhillenburg.com. So you can find my 31 website there and just more information about me. I also have a freebie. So if anybody wants it, you can go there and find it. It's my top 5 tips that I've learned over the last 20 years.
Great. And I'll leave a link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience and your wisdom for our listeners. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was fun. I
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
absolutely, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you.